So next, Jeff Andersen. Jeff, good morning. I'd like to welcome you. If you'd share your screen, you've got us through a pretty nice spring so far. You brought the wheat through pretty much in as good a shape as I've seen it in years. So what do we got in store for us this spring, Jeff? Good morning.
Well, good morning, Paul, and many thanks for the intro, and welcome to 2021 into April. And as for some of you, a little bit of an April day or April Fools with some frozen precipitation out there, but that's only short term. So we'll talk more about that in a second. But I think some interesting segue and some parallels with what Mike's been talking about with the early plant. We likely, given the outlook, going to see some opportunities here, at least something to think about, because we are looking probably at an extended period of warmer than normal weather. We've already had that for the last couple of weeks. I'm going to start there and talk about that, but we're going to see more, especially as we move into the upcoming weekend here. I am going to start with looking in rear view. These are daily temperatures back to the beginning of the year at Lansing, and it's fairly typical of what we've seen across most of the state. This is a little bit of a new format here from the folks at NOAA, but what you have here, daily temperatures, the blue bars are the actual max and min temperatures expressed here, drawn here as a bar, and the colors around here depict what is normal for this time of the year for that particular date. The brown range here, this area in the brown is where we should be. That's where the majority of our past those dates show up statistically, and then the reds here are the maximum records for that particular date. The blues are the record lows. So again, we typically are seeing, well, you can see as our temperatures varied here over time. There are a couple things that show up here in this particular graphic. Back to the beginning of January. Here's the Arctic outbreak that we had in the early half of February. You can see our temperatures here way below normal, some cases approaching records. We could have been much worse here in Michigan if it were not for Lake Michigan with no ice and giving us a lot of protection. It was much colder to the west than it was in Michigan. That's a good thing. But note that after really the latter part of February, as we especially moved into March here over the last several weeks, most of the time we have seen temperatures significantly above normal. There have been a couple ups and downs with the temperatures, but in general, temperatures during March have been above normal, and that's what the next graphic depicts here. These are mean departures from normal for the entire month here on the left, and you can see for most of the state 4 to as much as 8 degrees Fahrenheit above normal is where we ended up here for the month. And on the right-hand side here, courtesy of our EnviroWeather sites, these are degree day totals, base 50, the summation beginning at the beginning of March, and those totals range from the low teens up in the Upper Peninsula, with some of the coldest parts of the state, to the mid-80s. Now we have totals down in the far south, and if you're wondering, well, where does that put us, given the above normal temperatures, it's also fairly significantly ahead of normal, where we typically are. If you do the math, you would come up with a number somewhere on the order of maybe 2 to 3 calendar weeks ahead of where we are. And the reason I bring that up is we look at our overwintering crops and vegetation, our forages, our wheat. It is ahead of, at least in terms of phenological time and degree days, it's already a couple weeks ahead of where it typically is as of the beginning of April. And given the forecast, that surplus of degree day totals will likely continue here for the foreseeable future. Soil temperatures, and this goes back to some of what Mike just talked about. These are average 2-inch soil temperatures, and these are all, again, EnviroWeather sites here in Michigan, this particular graphic. But the mean temperatures here at 2 inches bare soil range from the 30s in the far northern part of the state to the upper 40s in the south. And I just looked at a couple values here earlier this morning, local and area here, just to give you an idea. And again, relating back to Mike's comments about soil temperatures, on Tuesday, we actually did have a very warm day before that cold front went through. We actually had 12 hours here locally where our 2-inch soil temperatures were above 50 degrees. Of course, then it goes back down at night. But yesterday, with a much colder day, we only had 3 or 4 hours at 50 degrees. So to give you an idea, again, where we are, we're ahead of normal. And given the outlook, especially looking at next week and maybe the following week here, it's something to watch closely because our soil temperatures, things have warmed up here more quickly than they do typically. The other major story looking behind here is that for much of the state, we have seen drier than normal conditions. That also relates to some of what Mike talked about. Drier soils warm up more quickly in the spring. This is a accumulated precipitation graphic, again, back to the beginning of the year for Lansing. And it's fairly typical of what we've seen in many portions of the state. But what you can see with this green line here, that's the actual observed total. The brown line is the normal accumulation. You can see that at Lansing anyway, we were running along pretty close to normal accumulations until late February. And then as this line deviates here, you can see we fell off. There was very, very little precipitation until last weekend. And we had, for at least southern parts of the state, we had a significant rainfall event with, in some cases, more than 1.5 inches of rain that fell. And you can see that out here towards the end of the series. That has helped. But in general, much of the state is now lagging behind normal accumulation for the season. The next graphic here shows the actual observed totals. This is for the month of March on the left, and totals here, or actually this is the 90-day. This goes back to the beginning of the year, and you can see observed totals are heaviest across southwestern portions of the state, where more than 6 inches of precipitation has fallen, ranging to less than 4 inches as we get into the northern lower and to the eastern upper. Expressed in terms of a percent of normal, and I think that's probably more important here, much of the state is lagging behind. And a lot of that has to do with especially the last month. You can see some portions of northeastern lower and into the eastern upper, less than half of normal precipitation. A couple things about that. We are coming out of the driest time climatologically of the year. February is the driest month climatologically in most of the state. But once we move into March and April, our precip picks up fairly rapidly towards warm season values. And so we are entering the season with a little bit of a deficit here. If you convert these into inches, most of the state is somewhere about 1 inch to as much as 3, maybe 3.5 inches below normal for the annual total thus far. So it's not huge, but it is certainly a deficit there to begin the season with. And the last thing, I'm going to use from the precipitation perspective here, looking at an output for last week's U.S. drought monitor chart. We had a jump. And now, important to note here, this graphic does not account for the rain that fell last weekend across southern lower Michigan. And again, it was significant. But in that particular last week's issuance of the drought monitor, up to 97% now, area-wise of Michigan is in either D0, abnormally dry, or D1, which is moderate drought. And one of the things that's happened here, developed over the last couple months, is we have seen abnormal dryness spread from western sections of the Midwest and certainly the West. That's been there all off season. But what's notable is we have seen an increase in expansion of the dryness eastward into the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes, including Michigan, and especially last week. Now, there will be a new issuance of the drought monitor today that should reflect that precip last week, but note that a lot of that precip was missed in the northern half of lower Michigan and into eastern upper Michigan. So there will be probably some reductions in this number here, but it's something at least to look at. Much worse if we were looking at this, of course, in late June or July, but then the beginning of April, but still something to keep in the back of the mind, or at least watch here a little bit as time goes on. Note that with this particular graphic, the driest conditions relative to the long-term normal are across the southern couple tiers of counties in the lower peninsula. So that's sort of where we've been, warmer and drier than normal here, especially over the last several weeks. Where are we headed? Well, we have, strange we mention it, but we're in the middle of a major Canadian origin air mass here, and that's with this big area of high pressure. These are surface conditions here, surface map right now. We still have some scattered lake effect snow showers. The inset here down in the lower right shows some streamers coming off of both Lake Superior and Lake Michigan. Those will gradually, as this high pressure gets closer to us during the day, those will gradually dissipate. But this is a late winter air mass. It's not a springtime air mass, and so today will be almost certainly will be the coldest day of the upcoming week. We should see significant warming thereafter, but high temperatures today remaining at or near freezing in far northern parts of the state, only the mid and upper 30s across the south. And if you're one of the, I think Phil mentioned 8,200 people with a ticket to see the opening day at Comerica down in Detroit, you're going to have to bring a couple extra layers. It's going to be fairly raw with a temperature again in the upper 30s and a stiff northerly wind. So hopefully there'll be more exciting things on the field to look at, because it's going to be a little bit miserable, or at least challenging to be sitting out there today. But I would note here, you can see the precipitation here. The lake effect snowfall should come to an end likely in most areas by the beginning of the afternoon or mid-afternoon at latest. And we're not talking any more than maybe there might be a whitening of the surface, so nothing significant, but a reminder, again, a little bit of an April Fool's. We are moving, though, as this high pressure gets closer here by tomorrow and overnight to a warming trend. Now, one more thing to talk about with this air mass. By tomorrow morning, it's going to be right over the top of us. You can see the ridge of high pressure here right over Michigan, and that's going to set the stage for an unusually cold night tonight. This is more of interest if you've got perennial fruit crops or some other maybe more sensitive vegetation. But we likely, given fairly clear, calm conditions, it won't be maybe completely calm, but it's going to be close. And where it does, we're going to see temperatures drop like a rock, probably low teens in the upper peninsula, and maybe some upper teens in the lower peninsula to low 20s or so, but abnormally cold. So a very, very hard freeze tonight. Overnight here, that will be the coldest, again, temperatures of the week. And once the axis of this high pressure moves to our east by later in the day, we should see our winds pick up once again, our turnover to the southwest, and begin at least tomorrow on Friday to usher in warmer temperatures. And you can see the surface map here that shows up. We should see a noticeable increase in temperatures, certainly by tomorrow, by Friday and Saturday. Fair conditions, we look into the Easter weekend here, looking actually wonderful. We have fantastic conditions, but we will be up in the 50s and 60s for high temperatures again once we get to Saturday and into Easter Sunday and even into Monday next week. So a very, very rapid, noticeable warm up here over the weekend. Next chance for precipitation after our lake effect here this morning, our remaining lake effect, probably coming late Monday and Tuesday into next week. It doesn't look like a big system, but that will be the next chance. So we're looking at several more, again, dry days here tomorrow into early next week. Very consistent theme and our medium range forecast guidance. And again, back to what Mike has introduced here, talked about early planting. This is something to watch, because the outlook very, very strongly calls for, with a high confidence, above normal temperatures. They're all over. If you look at the jet stream pattern here, both the 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day outlooks indicate troughing over Western North America, ridging over the east. That's a clear signal for warmer than normal conditions. So what we see here happening over the next couple days and again, the upcoming weekend will continue on into next week. We may have a couple days here and there that go back to normal, but it's going to go back above normal. And you can see that reflected in the mean temperature outlook here at the upper right. The precipitation outlook is actually calling for wetter than normal conditions. If I would have personally made this forecast, I probably would not have been that aggressive with the precip. I think if anything, maybe it'll be normal. And longer term, I think at least as we move into the middle of April, I would not be surprised even to see a little bit of drier than normal. So warmer and maybe drier than normal is the direction I think that we're headed for the next 2 and possibly 3 weeks. That's that. And again, especially the temperatures, very, very strong signal for that. The long lead outlooks here, these are the new ones from last week. April is on the top here, and almost all the lower 48, you can see warmer than normal temperatures are favored. For precipitation, no direction, equal chances is what EC stands for here, but definitely for warmer than normal. And then our 3-month extended outlook, April through June, also warmer than normal. But it does note that there still is the outlook officially calls for increased odds of wetter than normal conditions here for the early part of the growing season. This is probably the last piece of, outlook related to the current La Nina event, which is still in progress, but is weakened from where it was a couple months earlier. But I would note we have had very little typical La Nina-like weather here during the last few months. That's not, it's not very common. to see that, but we've been in La Nina conditions since last fall. We just have not seen many weather systems that are typical of La Nina, but this outlook still is reflecting that, because it is forecast to continue to weaken and then go back to neutral conditions in the Pacific here by the beginning of the summer. So that's sort of where that outlook, it's still reflecting that. So maybe take that with a little bit of grain of salt. We just have not seen much La Nina-like weather here recently. So summarizing here quickly, another very unusually or abnormally cool and blustery day here. And it will be windy once again, with some scattered snow showers here, especially for the next few hours. But those will dissipate by afternoon. And then tonight we have hard freeze conditions statewide with some of the coldest temperatures we actually we may see for some time. But after that, and the high pressure moves to our east, or the center of it, we're going to see rapid warming. Tomorrow we should be well up into the 30s and 40s again for most portions of the state, and we'll do 10 degrees better than that on Saturday and on Easter Sunday, back into the 50s and 60s, so back up to above normal, and our min temperatures back up above freezing by the weekend as well. Dry after this afternoon for the upcoming weekend, and probably for most of next Monday, but the next chance for precip coming maybe Monday or Tuesday of next week. And then, as you just saw, our medium range guidance and actually longer term guidance, all of those are suggesting warmer than normal temperatures. So collectively here, and thinking about where we are, we're ahead of normal for at least for our overwintering crops and vegetation. They're a couple weeks advanced. Soil temperatures are warmer than they typically are at this time of the year. And given the outlook, a lot probably is going to be happening. Certainly in terms of plant development and faster than normal, it does with the outlook and given where we already are. And so with that, I'll wrap up here and turn it back, Paul, to you to wrap things up.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeff. There's one quick question came in to me. How does this year's weather pattern compare to 2012?
And we've already had a couple of fruit growers ask that question. And the good news is it's above normal, but it's nowhere near where we were in 2012. And in 2012, climatologically, and of course we know the impacts that one is by itself. That was by far the warmest March on record. It's actually the warmest month in terms of departure from normal and of any month in history in Michigan. So yes, we're on the same side of zero, but nowhere close to, fortunately, close to where we were in 2012. So I think we can work with the surplus of degree days we have this year, but it's way below where we were in 2020 or in 2012.
Okay. Very, very good. Thank you very much, Jeff.